Oh, how things on the water can turn quickly, kind of like these cruise passengers found out here. The two white vessels are two river cruise ships that happened to be docked, letting passengers off, when all of a sudden the barge seen on the right of the screen decided it was going to go ahead and collide into the cruise ships. This is a scene on the Rhine River, and just one of the wild things we're going to witness in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week, though, is going to be the biggest boating story going on right now, and it is going to take us up to New York, where this was the scene several days back. When the vessel seen in the images here, which is the Mexican Navy's sailing training vessel Cuauhtémoc, was visiting New York City as part of a goodwill tour and was on its way to its final destination of Iceland. In the images, you see the vessel departing New York with its 229 crew members on board, on its way to a refueling point in New York before continuing on to its final leg of its trip toward Iceland, when all of a sudden, things went terribly wrong, as we're about to witness here. The vessel winds up backing off the dock, and instead of pulling forward and heading down the Hudson River, it winds up colliding with the Brooklyn Bridge, leading to the tragic incident that we see here. One of the key parts of this is a lot of the crew were actually standing up on the mast at the time of the incident, as it's an actual tradition for these types of ships to have that happen while they're departing the port. Now, the incident itself actually occurs on the East River, which is a tidal strait that ships such as this will use to get back out into the Hudson to be able to depart New York Harbor. Unfortunately, obviously, things did not go to plan. The ship went the wrong direction. Right now, an investigation has been launched to try to determine the cause of the incident, but for the most part, it seems there's more questions than answers still at this point in time. Some of the questions I've heard asked so far about this involve this tug vessel that's assisting here, and people want to know why the tug didn't assist in trying to stop the vessel from hitting the bridge. And there are a couple basic reasons for this one. The first one, the tug was never actually attached to the sailing vessel itself. Unfortunately, most sailing vessels like this really don't ideally go with tugboats, and the tug was only there to try and push it into position to where it can make its turn and then head down the East River. Unfortunately, though, as we see, the vessel continued back. A few things are going against the boat. One, the current and the wind were both pushing back into the bridge, but it is very obvious from the images we've seen that this vessel was fully in reverse at the time of the collision, which leads me to believe what's actually happened here is a mechanical failure. While no details have been released on the exact cause yet, nor what actual propulsion system this vessel uses, I do know its sister ships use a CPP system, which is a controllable pitch propeller, so I'm going to make the bold assumption that this vessel actually does the same. Now, for those who aren't familiar with this system, what it actually does is instead of the propeller spinning clockwise or counterclockwise to go forward and reverse, the system actually adjusts the pitch of the propeller blades to allow the vessel to go forward and backwards. Now, the reason this is a little interesting is there's been several reports of vessels with this type of system having similar incidents. Now, one of the things that triggers this to make me think that this might be a common occurrence that happens with this type of propulsion system is the first thing the captain mentioned in the interview after the incident was that he noticed he lost steering, not that he lost propulsion. Now, my guess is he actually probably lost the ability to control both, but there's been several scenarios that have happened recently where CPP systems have failed, which have led into some investigations, and most of those investigations have found that a failure in CPP systems such as hydraulic failure or an electrical issue can prevent the blades from adjusting their pitch, but this also can lead to a loss of steering capabilities during this failure as well. But it will be interesting to see what they find is the actual cause from their investigation. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to Panama, where this was the scene several weeks back when Ty Pitlock and three of his fellow corpsmen were enjoying a day off of deployment from their U.S. Navy careers and decided to go for a day of fishing off the coast of Panama, when all of a sudden this day of fishing turned into something a little more, where instead of catching fish, they were pulling people out of the water. As they were heading out, they wound up spotting two people floating in the water offshore, screaming for help. The crew quickly pulled up on the two women and wound up pulling them on board their vessel and out of the water. Once they got them on board, they used their medical training from the Navy to stabilize the two women and try and find out exactly where they came from. Eventually, they talked to them and found out the women were on board another vessel that had approximately a total of 20 people on board. The vessel wound up capsizing, sending all 20 people into the water. They alerted the Panamanian Coast Guard and Navy to the incident, who wound up meeting up with this vessel and grabbing the 2 people off the boat and launching a rescue effort to try and save the other 20 people who were on the vessel. These 2 girls and everybody else who was on board that ship got exceptionally lucky that this crew wound up coming by. The crew on board the fishing vessel credited their Navy training in assisting these people and getting them safely out of the water, but also using their proper techniques to contact the correct authorities to get them out there to save the other people who were in the water as well. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to the coast of Italy, where this was the scene just a few days back, where passengers wound up marveling at the beautiful sights that the captain of their vessel brought them to. But unfortunately, the captain of the vessel brought them just a little too close. The images here show the cruise liner Silver Ray approaching the Farallone rocks off the coast of Capri. Now, unfortunately for this cruise liner, there were some local environmentalists visiting the site from the cliffs who noticed the cruise ship getting a little too close and wound up pulling out their smartphone and recording the incident as we see here. Now, unfortunately for this ship, it appears that they were actually breaking an Italian law by being this close to the rocks. The Italian authorities wound up reviewing the video and checking the AIS signal from the cruise ship, and they confirmed that the vessel had come within 500 meters of the rock structure, which apparently is a failure to maintain a minimum distance under Italian regulations. Unfortunately for this crew, that's led to this cruise liner actually being issued a fine and also being reprimanded by the Italian Coast Guard. Now, I know this might seem like a minor offense, getting too close to the rocks, but of course the Italian authorities point out the incident that occurred 15 years ago when the Costa Concordia actually did something very similar, and the next thing that cruise ship knows, it winds up hitting an uncharted rock, becoming a total loss, which actually led to the changes and reforms in Italian law that now make this illegal to come this close to items such as that rock. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us up to Massachusetts, where this was the scene just a little over a week ago when Philip Tran and his group of friends opted to go out and enjoy an evening of squid fishing off the coast of Cape Cod, when all of a sudden they got out to the fishing grounds and they wound up fishing for something a little different. Upon their arrival, they spotted another vessel that had been out squidding for the evening, but that vessel was capsized in frigid water with 3 fishermen on top of the hull.
Capsized boat off of Squaw Island.
Be advised, there's 3 people. Coast Guard identified.
Philip and his crew quickly jumped into action, alerting the Coast Guard and local authorities to the situation and assisting the 3 people in pulling them out of the water and bringing them onto his boat. According to the crew, they'd been out there squidding as well when all of a sudden the weather picked up, the vessel wound up taking on water and capsizing as we see in the images. They wound up bringing the 3 people on board their vessel until local emergency services arrived, and they transferred the 3 people over at that time.
There's 3 people. They were in the water. They're currently back in the boat at this time.
Local authorities praised the fishermen for arriving on the scene and spotting these guys in the water and pulling them out. They claimed that due to the frigid weather conditions that night and the rough conditions, this crew, especially with no life jackets on, would have had a tough time surviving the evening out there in the water. Thanks for watching, crew. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram at Broncos Guru and let us know when you might see your stories over here. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button.